There's something about new beginnings that's both thrilling and unsettling. Just a few days ago, I'd moved into the city more for ambition than anything else. It wasn't that I disliked my old life. It was peaceful, predictable, settled. Too settled, maybe. I'd spent years in a quiet town on the city's outskirts, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. But I was ready for something different, ready to make my mark. The job offer had been too good to ignore a stepping stone, I told myself, to bigger things. So I packed up, left behind the suffocating comfort of my old town, and moved into a modest apartment squeezed between two looming skyscrapers that made me feel like the city itself was pressing down on me. I was alone, but never in silence. The constant hum of life seeped through the walls, footsteps echoing from the street below, distant horns, snippets of passing conversations. On my third night, some new colleagues invited me out. It felt like the perfect chance to unwind, to connect, maybe even make a few friends. We met somewhere downtown, a place buzzing with neon light and noise. Laughter bounced off the pavement as we strolled through the crowd. They were a lively bunch. Chris, the loud one with a joke, always ready. Elena, quieter but sharp-tongued with a dry wit. And Jason, someone I connected with almost immediately. He, like me, seemed slightly out of place in the city's chaos. We wandered through the streets beneath the shifting glow of store windows and bar signs, their lights throwing long shadows across the sidewalks. "We should find a place to sit," Chris said, stretching with exaggerated flair. "I could use a drink." "Somewhere with good food," Jason added. "I'm starving." So we kept walking, passing one crowded bar after another, none quite right. We weren't in a rush. The night was young, the air was warm, and conversation flowed easily. Then, as we turned a corner, I heard something. A low hum, a whisper, or maybe just the wind. It came from an alleyway wedged between two soot-covered buildings. Nothing distinct, just a murmur. I paused. "Hey, hang on a sec," I said, almost to myself, stepping away from the group. They didn't notice. They were deep in conversation, voices fading as I drifted toward the alley's entrance. Curiosity tugged at me. I peered into the narrow gap, the darkness thick and still. Nothing but damp concrete, cracked walls, and a line of overflowing dumpsters. Still, something about the alley felt wrong. Wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I told myself I'd take a quick look and come right back. But the deeper I walked, the more the alley seemed to twist, literally. What had started as a straight path began to bend, narrowing into tight turns and winding passages. I should have stopped. I should have turned around, called Jason, anything, but I didn't. Half amused, half irritated with myself. I pressed on, convinced I'd loop back out any second. But I didn't. By the time I realized how far I'd wandered into this maze of back streets, it was nearing 9 p.m. The sky had vanished behind the jagged silhouettes of buildings, and the air grew colder, heavier. I reached for my phone, intending to message someone, maybe joke about how I'd gotten lost. I didn't want to admit it seriously, not yet. As I scrolled through my contacts, a dim green glow caught my attention. I looked up. In the distance, nestled in the alley's gloom, was a small, flickering sign above an old doorway. The Lost Bar. I let out a short laugh. How fitting. Lost indeed. There was something oddly magnetic about it, a hidden place tucked deep within the city's forgotten corners. Maybe I could bring the others here, pretend I discovered something cool, rather than confess I'd just stumbled upon it while hopelessly lost. I stepped up to the door and pushed. The hinges gave a low, rusty creak. Then the darkness inside welcomed me in. As I stepped inside, a strange warmth wrapped around me. The bar was cozy, almost too cozy. It felt like stepping into another era or a dream someone had half forgotten. Dim amber light bathed the room, soft and flickering. Dusty chandeliers hung low from the ceiling, their crystals dull with age. Faded wooden furniture filled the space, and in the corner, a jukebox murmured a tune I couldn't quite place, something distant and haunting, like a melody from a life I'd never lived. I took a seat at the bar. Other patrons dotted the room, but none of them spoke. No conversation, no laughter, just silent figures, each consumed by their drinks, their eyes distant, their presence heavy. The air carried a strange weight, as if I had walked into a place where everyone knew something I didn't. Behind the counter stood a tall man, gray hair, a face like carved stone, and hands that moved in slow, methodical circles as he polished a glass. He didn't look up. I pulled out my phone, intending to call Jason, maybe even impress him with this strange little spot I'd discovered. Just as my finger hovered over the call button, a voice cut through the silence like a blade. "What do you think you're doing?" I froze. The bartender was staring at me now, expressionless, his eyes dark and unreadable. I hesitated. "I'm just calling my friends. Thought they might want to join me." He didn't blink. Setting the glass down, he leaned forward. His voice was quiet but sharp. "We have rules here." I gave a nervous chuckle. "What, like no phones at the bar?" Still no smile. No movement. "No, not that kind of rule." A heavy silence stretched between us. Then, slowly, he spoke again. "First rule, you can't find this bar on purpose. It only shows itself when you're lost, physically, emotionally. If you try to lead someone here, they won't find it. Ever." I waited for the punchline. None came. His face was stone, unflinching. I laughed weakly, trying to cut the tension. "Right, got it." Very poetic. Ignoring him, I hit the call button. Jason picked up. I told him about the bar, the name, the decor, the vibe. But he sounded confused. "There's no bar down here," he said. "We've been walking up and down the alley. No signs. No lights. Nothing. Are you screwing with us?" A knot twisted in my stomach. "No, I'm serious. I'm inside right now. It's called the Lost Bar. You can't miss it." "I don't know what to tell you, man," Jason replied. "We're standing right where you said to go. There's nothing here." Something cold unfurled in my chest. I glanced around again, and for the first time, I really looked at the patrons. A man near the window wore a perfectly tailored 1940s suit. A woman in a vintage 1980s cocktail dress sat in the corner, glass untouched, eyes vacant. The more I scanned the room, the more I realized they didn't belong. Not to the same moment, not even the same world. And none of them had aged. An oppressive silence filled the air, thick with unspoken truth. Everyone here knew something I hadn't yet realized. My phone rang again. "Jason." "Look," he said, irritated, "this isn't funny. We're standing here, and this place doesn't exist." I stood up, unnerved. "I'll come outside," and a hand clamped down on my shoulder. Cold. Too cold. I turned. The bartender again. His grip like ice, his face drained of life. "Second rule," he said, voice gravel and steel. "You do not leave the bar before midnight." I stared at him, heart thudding. "This place keeps its own time," he went on. "If you walk out before the clock strikes 12, you'll never make it back. Not to the bar. Not to your old life. Not anywhere that makes sense." I wanted to laugh, to accuse him of pulling some elaborate prank. But I couldn't, because the jukebox kept playing a song I almost remembered. Because no one looked at me. Because outside, my friend stood in a place that no longer had a door. And because the feeling creeping up my spine wasn't confusion anymore. It was fear that I glanced over the bartender's shoulder toward the old clock hanging crookedly on the wall. 10 p.m. This was ridiculous. I shook my head and raised the phone in my ear again, ready to tell Jason I was coming outside. But all I heard was static. Not a weak signal. Not interference. Just static, loud, sharp, consuming. Something was wrong. I looked back at the bartender, and that's when I saw it. His face had changed. The skin on his cheeks was stretched unnaturally tight, as though pulled back by invisible hooks. His mouth widened into a grotesque grin, far too wide, the edges of his lips nearly tearing. His eyes, where there had been eyes, there were now only dark, yawning voids. My body froze. My chest tightened. My breath caught. I turned away instinctively, desperate to escape the sight of his twisted, inhuman face, and saw that every single patron in the bar had turned to face me. None of them moved. None of them spoke. But their heads had turned in perfect, unnatural unison. Their faces were blank, eyes vacant, expressions hollow. But they watched. They watched. I stood up slowly, legs trembling. I didn't run. I didn't even walk quickly. Something told me sudden movement might be a mistake. Their eyes followed me, perfectly synchronized, tracking my every step as I made my way toward the door. My hand trembled around my phone. Suddenly, it crackled again, louder this time. The static twisted and warped into a voice, low and distorted beneath the noise. The bartender's voice. "Third rule," it whispered. "Never look at the clock. Time doesn't move the same inside the bar. If you look at the clock, you start to notice things. Faces shifting, patrons vanishing. My mean spoon." I turned, slowly, back toward the bar. The bartender's face had returned to normal, calm, stony, unreadable. But I had seen it, that thing beneath the skin. I knew it was still there, watching me. I stepped away from the door, heart hammering. I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not before midnight. I returned to the bar, head down, eyes averted, away from the patrons, away from the mirror, away from the clock. Their eyes still followed me. I could feel it, an invisible pressure on the back of my skull. I sat down again, hands trembling against the worn wood of the bar. The bartender turned to me slowly. His expression was neutral. Too neutral. "Kid," he said quietly, "you broke the rule." I swallowed hard. "But you didn't tell me the third rule in time. How was I supposed to know?" His lips curled just slightly, not quite a smile. "You didn't let me finish talking." I sat in stunned silence, the weight of his words crushing down on me. Around us, the bar seemed to exhale, the patrons returning to their drinks, the illusion of normalcy snapping back into place. But it wasn't real. I knew that now. The bartender reached beneath the bar and pulled out a small, yellowed scrap of paper. He scribbled something in tight, slanted handwriting, then slid it across the counter toward me. "These are the rest of the rules," he said. "You'd best follow them." I picked up the paper, my hand shaking. The ink was old, smudged, like the list had been written 100 times by 100 different people. Fourth rule: if you see my reflection in the bar mirror, don't speak. Fifth rule: if an old man sits beside you, offer him a drink. Always. Sixth rule: if the entrance door opens on its own, don't look. Seventh rule: never acknowledge the woman in the red dress. Eighth rule: if you feel a tap on your shoulder, don't turn around. A chill ran down my spine. My mouth was dry. I didn't know what half of this meant, but I knew I didn't want to find out. I looked up at the bartender. What's the deal with the woman in the red dress?" I asked, barely above a whisper. His face darkened. He leaned in close, voice low and tight with something like fear. "Every now and then, she appears. Faded red dress, pale skin, black eyes. She sits at the far end of the bar. No one else notices her. If you look at her, she'll look back. If you speak to her..." He paused. "She'll follow you. Everywhere. Even after you leave. And she never stops." My stomach turned. I slumped back into the seat, overwhelmed, cold sweat clinging to my neck. I needed something, anything, to keep my hands from shaking. "Whiskey," I muttered. "On the rocks." He nodded once and poured a glass. The sound of ice clinking in the silence louder than it should have been. I took a long drink, the burr in my throat grounding me, barely. My fingers still twitched. Then I saw it, out of the corner of my eye. The bar mirror, and the bartender's reflection in it. I froze, because the reflection wasn't right. It wasn't him. The reflection twisted in the mirror, contorting into something grotesque, wrong. The bartender's face stretched and warped, as though melted and reshaped by invisible hands. His eyes were empty, hollow, twin pits of nothing. His grin tore across his face impossibly wide, and the reflection was staring. Not at me, through me. I felt my heart seize, my breath catch in my throat. My body locked up. I couldn't look away, and yet I knew I must not speak. Don't speak. It took every ounce of strength to wrench my gaze from the mirror. I looked down at the bar, my hands trembling around the glass. My pulse thundered in my ears. I took a sip of whiskey, hoping the burn would anchor me, but it did nothing. The fear sat heavy in my chest, tightening like a noose. I had to move. I needed to get away from that mirror. I stood up, legs unsteady, and walked a few steps from the bar. I kept my head down, refusing to even glance in the mirror's direction. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping like fingers drumming on the wood. I turned. An old man now sat at the bar, his shoulders slumped forward, face hidden in the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat there, still and silent. I froze. Fifth rule: if an old man sits next to you at the bar, you should always offer him a drink. No hesitation. My instinct screamed, obey the rule. I rushed back to the bar, trying to steady my voice. What would you like to drink? Silence. He didn't respond, didn't even move. For a long, suffocating moment, I thought I'd made another mistake, that I was too late. That, slowly, the old man turned his head toward me, and I saw them, his eyes, or rather, the absence of them. Two yawning black sockets stared back. His mouth open wide, slack and unnatural. No words, just a sound, a distant, echoing scream, rising from nowhere and everywhere at once. The kind of sound that crawls into your skull, that shakes the inside of your bones. The scream grew louder, sharper, until the walls of the bar themselves seemed to tremble. Panic gripped me, but I didn't flinch. I grabbed my whiskey glass and slid it across the bar toward him. The scream stopped. The old man turned back toward the bar, his face expressionless, the voids of his eyes gazing ahead as if nothing had happened. I looked around. The other patrons hadn't moved. They hadn't reacted at all, as if he, in his scream, had never existed. I couldn't take this much longer. I turned to the door, pulse pounding, fear clawing at my throat. Midnight was close, had to be. But how close? I yanked my phone from my pocket, desperate to check the time. The screen was black, dead. No matter how many times I pressed the button, it wouldn't turn on. I turned back to the bar, voice hoarse with dread. What time is it? The bartender's eyes locked onto mine, calm and unreadable. Good, he said softly. You followed the rule. A pause. It's 11:30 p.m. Relief washed over me, momentary, thin. Just 30 more minutes. I could make it. I had to. Behind him, the clock ticked, soft, distorted as if underwater. Faint. Wrong. I didn't look at it. I wouldn't. I asked for another whiskey. The bartender nodded and poured. I drank slowly, trying to calm my nerves. The whiskey was warm but hollow, like it knew it couldn't help. My eyes flickered toward the mirror again. Don't look. But the memory of that reflection was seared into my mind, his stretched face, that gaping grin. I looked around the bar instead. The patrons were all back to their routines, if you could call them that. Their movements were sluggish, like they were submerged. Their eyes were vacant. Their expressions blank. None of them looked at me. None of them had looked at anything, really, except the bartender. He was the only one who saw me, the only one who moved with purpose. I drummed my fingers on the bar, trying to stay grounded. Try to remind myself I was still here, still real. Just 30 more minutes. I couldn't afford to mess up again. The bartender's voice echoed again in my head, low and haunting. Every rule you break has consequences. I thought back to the list. I knew it by heart now, each line engraved in my thoughts. Don't look at the clock. Don't speak if you see the bartender's reflection. Offer the old man a drink. Don't turn around if someone taps your shoulder. Never acknowledge the woman in the red dress. I exhaled shakily. 30 minutes. That was all I had to survive. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. She sat at the far end of the bar, barely visible in the shadows. Her dress was red, deep but faded, like it had been washed too many times. The once vivid fabric now dulled in the low, amber light. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her long black hair spilled over her shoulders in soft, unearthly waves. A chill crept down my spine. I tore my gaze back to my drink, heart thudding like a war drum inside my chest. I could feel her presence, thick, oppressive, like the weight of a thunderstorm pressing down on the room. The air turned heavy, suffocating. My hands gripped the glass tight. Never acknowledge the woman in the red dress. I repeated the rule like a prayer. I drew in a slow, careful breath. I didn't dare turn my head, not even a fraction, but I could feel her watching me. I didn't know how I knew, only that I did. The atmosphere had shifted. Time felt brittle. The silence grew heavier, bloated with tension, as though even the air itself was holding its breath. I swallowed. My throat was dry. My fear wasn't the kind that came from shadows or creaks in the dark. It was deeper, primal, the terror of facing something that wasn't just unnatural but wrong. I focused on the bar, tracing every nick and stain in the old wood like it would save me. Questions swarmed in my mind, loud and unwelcome. Why is she here? Has she always been here hiding? Watching? Did I draw her out by breaking a rule? Seconds stretched like hours. The longer she remained, the more the tension warped the air, thickening until it buzzed under my skin. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The creeping sense that something was coming closer, sliding silently toward me from the shadows. My skin prickled. It felt like 1,000 unseen eyes were fixed on me. Still, I didn't move. I barely breathed. Then I heard it. A faint creak, so soft it could have been imagined. But I didn't imagine it. She'd shifted in her seat. My heart roared in my chest. Don't look. Don't acknowledge her. It's just a trick. It's just the bar. It's testing you. Then another sound. Tapping. Not from a bar. From her direction. Fingernails. Lightly rapping against wood. Slow. Rhythmic. Like she was lost in thought or calling me forward. The sound wormed its way through the silence. Louder with each pass. Insistent. Inviting. Deadly. I gritted my teeth, fists clenched so tightly my knuckles bleached white. The urge to glance over, to just check, was almost unbearable. But I didn't. I remembered what the bartender had told me. She never stops. The tapping grew louder, sharper, like a metronome built to unravel the mind. I shut my eyes tight. Then, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Heavier. Expectant. Everything felt still. Too still. Maybe she was gone. Maybe I had passed. But then, a voice. Soft. Melodic. Dripping with charm. Would you like to dance? My blood turned to ice. It was her. Her voice was smooth like velvet, soaked in something foul. Too gentle, too sweet. A predator's lullaby. My pulse spiked. I couldn't move. The air grew colder. Heavier. I felt her behind me. Closer now. Much closer. I could feel her presence, icy and wrong, standing just behind my chair. Waiting for me to acknowledge her. I clenched my jaw, hands digging into the bar's edge. Don't speak. Don't look. Don't move. Her breath brushed against the back of my neck. Cold. Damp. Inhuman. Would you like to dance? This time softer, like a whisper curled inside my ear. I wanted to scream. Wanted to leap from my seat and run without looking back. But I couldn't. I was frozen, paralyzed by the awful, intoxicating terror of something ancient brushing against my soul. The bar around me faded. The people, their faces, their murmurs dissolved into shadows. There was only me, and her, and the rule. Then, just as suddenly, the cold vanished. The pressure lifted. I blinked dazed, still seated, still breathing. The air felt warmer. The world returned in faint, shaky layers. The bar, the lights, the voices. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I knew she was gone. The heaviness had retreated, slipping back into whatever shadow had birthed her. But I also knew something else. She had chosen me, and next time I might not get away. I let out a shaky breath, my body trembling from the encounter. I didn't know how I had survived it all, only that I had followed the rule. I had made it through. The bartender approached again, his face unreadable as ever. Good, he said quietly. You didn't break the rule. I couldn't respond. I didn't have the energy. All I could do was nod weakly, my mind still reeling. Before I could fully process what had happened, he leaned in close, voice dropping to a low, ominous whisper. There's one more rule, he said. After midnight, the door cannot be opened from inside. My stomach dropped. The relief I'd felt moments ago evaporated, replaced by a fresh wave of terror. My heart pounded violently, the weight of those words settling over me like a suffocating blanket. My mind scrambled, desperate to make sense of it all. I was trapped. My hands clenched the edge of the bar, knuckles white as dread coursed through me. Seconds ticked by, dragging me toward a decision I didn't want to make. Leave now? Break the second rule? The thought gnawed at me, growing louder with every tick of the clock. If you try to leave before the clock strikes 12, you'll find yourself unable to return to the life you knew. The bartender's voice was cold, unyielding, but now it felt distant, like a warning almost mocking me. What life? What was there for me, really? Sure, I just gotten this new job, but I wasn't settled. My old life wasn't something I longed for. Lonely nights in a quiet town, distant friends, and a lingering dissatisfaction. I had moved here hoping for something new, but now I wasn't sure. Was it better to leave? Accept whatever consequence followed? Maybe what waited outside the bar wasn't worse than the slow descent into madness I was feeling here. Time slipped through my fingers. Before I knew it, the bartender leaned in again. "It's almost midnight," he said, voice void of emotion. My pulse quickened. Panic surged. I couldn't think, couldn't decide. The ticking clock filled my ears, relentless, unmerciful. Then the clock chimed midnight. Everything froze. The soft chime echoed through the bar, dragging with it an unbearable silence. My mind spun, reeling out of control. It was too late, wasn't it? The clock had struck. I was trapped in this twisted, nightmarish place with rules designed to break me. I couldn't even muster a thought. My breathing was shallow. My eyes darted nervously around the bar. Then, out of nowhere, the door creaked open behind me. My heart stopped. My mind raced. The sixth rule: if the entrance door opens on its own, don't look. But that door, that was my escape. The rules blurred in my mind, colliding with a desperate need to leave. Who opened it? The question echoed inside me, but the answer didn't matter. This was my chance. A cold draft swept into the bar, chilling my skin. The air grew heavier, colder by the second. Faint footsteps echoed, soft, deliberate, drawing closer. Each step reverberated inside my skull, as though the bar itself amplified the sound. And then, the faintest hint of breathing. Slow, steady, almost imperceptible. But there, something was there. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the primal urge to look behind me. Don't look, don't look. The cold crept up my spine as if a presence loomed inches over my shoulder. I could feel it, watching. My legs trembled. Slowly, I slid off the bar stool. I had to move, had to get out before it was too late. My mind screamed at me to run, to bolt for the door and never look back. But I forced myself to stay calm. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure the whole bar could hear it. Then, a light tap on my shoulder. The eighth rule pulsed in my head like a warning siren, urging me to ignore the icy fingers that touched me. My heart raced. My palms grew clammy. I took a hesitant step toward the open door. The cold draft beckoned, pulling me toward the exit. And yet, the air remained thick, weighted down by the presence still behind me. I couldn't look. I couldn't acknowledge it. The rules were all I had. I took another step. The cold intensified, freezing my breath as it escaped in shaky gasps. My feet felt heavy, as if dragging through thick fog. The footsteps behind me grew louder, closer. The presence pressed down with every step I took toward the door. The tap on my shoulder came again, firmer this time. I swallowed hard, vision swimming, but I didn't turn around. My gaze locked ahead. My hands trembling, I reached for the doorframe. I was so close. The cold wind bit my skin. The escape was tantalizingly within reach. But then a faint whisper just behind me. So close it felt inside my head. "Stay." I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the overwhelming urge to listen, to turn, to face whatever lurked behind me. But I knew I couldn't. I had to leave. This was my only chance. I forced myself forward. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached the doorway. The cold air hit me like a slap. The footsteps behind me grew louder. I could feel the presence almost breathing down my neck. But I didn't stop. I took one last step, crossed the threshold. Then, silence. The cold vanished in an instant. The suffocating weight lifted from my shoulders. My breath came out in ragged gasps as I stumbled forward, out of the bar and into the night. I blinked, disoriented by the alley's darkness surrounding me. I was outside, but when I turned, there was nothing. No door, no green light illuminating the alleyway. It was gone, like it had never existed. I stood there, legs trembling, body still shaking from adrenaline coursing through my veins. I checked my phone. My hand still shaking slightly, the screen lit up without issue. The clock read almost 5 a.m. Morning was approaching. It was over. I exhaled a long, shaky breath, half expecting to hear footsteps or the bartender's voice. But there was nothing, just the quiet hum of the city, the distant sound of early morning traffic. I took a few steps down the alley, glancing over my shoulder one last time. The alley was empty, dark walls and shadows. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling. Someone, was still watching. With one last glance at the empty space where the bar had been, I turned and walked into the biting morning air. I didn't look back again. I escaped,